Rain makes the lamplight bloom like slow gold. It softens the edges of the lane, blurs the outlines of the birch and the low-roofed houses, and gathers itself in the little awning that stretches before Valhalla's silent hall. The hall stands quiet against the weather, a long, low place of oak and heavy linen, its banners and shields folded inward like contented doors. From the threshold, a single lamp keeps vigil, its oil steady and warm, a small star winking against the gray. Within that glow the hall breathes in and out, the hiss of a kettle, a sand glass that sighs when it is turned, the faint scrape of leather being smoothed, the soft clink of a mallet on brass. It is a place made for shelter and for mending, for voices that do not need to rise to be understood. Eldri is the keeper of that quiet. She moves with the economy of someone who has lived most of her hours by lamp and bench. Her palms know the exact weight of a thread, the contour of a grommet, the small, stubborn heat of a beeswax lump warmed between thumb and forefinger. Tonight, her hair is tucked beneath a simple wool cap, and her fingers smell of wax and brewed herb. She tends the lamp as if tending a small living thing, trimming the wick, lifting the glass chimney, coaxing smoke back into the throat until the flame settles into a breathing shape. The kettle sings low, then bows its steam into the rafters. Beside the lamp sits a sand glass, its glass kept clear and its sand fine as ground oats. Eldri turns it once to mark the passing of this particular hour, and sets it upon the table like an old friend. The hall is not like the halls of songs that praise clashing and glory. Here the shields are repurposed into shutters, and the banners become curtains. Runes on parchment are never carved in boast, but painted in small, patient strokes, their shapes softened to become charms that catch light rather than command fate. The wooden shelves are crowded with tools arranged by habit rather than ceremony. A row of awls, a coil of waxed thread, tins of beeswax, a pot of paste that glistens like cooled porridge, strips of tanned leather, a block of oak for hammering grommets. There are jars of dried herbs, a small chest of smooth river stones, and a basket of linen squares mended and remended until the edges had taken the shape of a hand. The hall keeps the smell of wood smoke and washed linen, the residue of many small repairs and the memory of dozens of shared cuppas. People come to Valhalla's silent hall for small things. They come for biscuit crumbs and tea, for the steadiness of a lamp, for hands that know how to fold a torn sleeve so it will not scar the skin. They come because the hall keeps the sort of time that allows a thing to be made right. Sand glass hour by sand glass hour, unhurried. The regulars drift in against the rain like leaves, finding the same sheltering root. First comes Asa, who carries stories in her pockets as if they were buttons and never throws any away. She is slight and bent with a kind of cheerful persistence, and when she speaks the hall listens because the stories she brings fit themselves into the seams of the room. She sets on the table a small tin of sugared cakes and, folding her gloves, remembers a seam she once stitched by lamplight, while the wind played tunes with the eaves. Her voice is clipped with memory. She names the little things that held her past together. An end of string, a child's cuff, a grandfather's pocket square. And the others nod, because mending is always also a way of naming what must be kept. Sina arrives next, carrying a roll of linen and the steady hum of an old lullaby. Her hands know stitch counts the way some folks know the lines of a shore. She seats herself at the table and opens the roll to reveal a bundle of threads that catch the light like small rivers. There is a rhythm in the way she draws the thread through cloth, a sound like a bird's wing called up close. soft, certain. Occasionally she hums without real intention, and the hall answers her in kind. The children look up from their small tasks, and the man with the hammer pauses to listen. Sina's eyes are quick. She sees where a seam will give before it has fully shown its fatigue. Bjarne, who mends bindings and bends metal with the same easy patience, comes in carrying a wooden box of tools. His hands are calloused in places that seem to remember 100 small contracts with the world, hammering, pressing, shaping. He brings with him a strip of oak for framing, a length of leather that has been softened until it sings when you bend it, and a small hammer whose face is as familiar to him as a greeting. He does not speak much by way of preface. He lays his tools out like habits, and the table becomes a quiet workshop. Inga, who tends the doorway herb tubs and brings bulbs that smell faintly of the damp earth, arrives with a clay pot wrapped in coarse paper. The pot is not for planting tonight, but for sharing. Small, browned loaves, slightly cracked at the top, that give off the warm, yeasty scent of a good oven. She wipes her hands on her apron and places a sprig of rosemary beside the kettle, and her presence is like a season remembered. The children laugh at the crumbs. They know which loaf will crumble and which will keep its shape through a pocket for the journey home. 2 children, Tove and Leif, pad in on soft feet, their fingers raw with practice. They are apprentices in small things. Tove with paper and paste, learning the way a sheet can be coaxed into translucence. Leif with a tiny awl and a patient teacher in Bjarne, learning how a grommet will hold if set true. They work with the sort of eager care that has not yet learned to hurry. Their presence brings a different sort of light into the hall, the kind that comes from watching and trying and sometimes from small mistakes that are then shown again with a steady hand. A visiting mender, Haldor, arrives later with a bag of more unusual tools. He has a knack for seeing the weak point in a leather strap or the place where a stitch might refuse its work. He sets down his bag, shakes off the rain, and offers, without fuss, a suggestion or two about reinforcing edges. He is practical and gentle, and he knows when to speak and when to let the hall and its regulars find their own rhythm. They settle into the room as into a shared habit. Tea is poured, spoons trace the sides of mugs, biscuit crumbs fall like small agreements. The kettle sighs again and is set on the floor to cool. The lamp throws a long, lazy shadow over the table. Where its light meets the banners, the colors bloom and soften. In this way, home is not only a place of walls and roof, but a slow concord of daily crafts, and the hall keeps them all like a choir holding a single note. If this calm suits you, a quiet like helps us share more evenings like this. The trouble they notice is not sudden. It is the kind of complaint that opens by degrees, a small insistence at the edge of vision. The outer curtain of the hall, linen thick and heavy, once bright with dyed bands, hangs lower on one side. A drip has come to rest there where the rain has found a threadbare seam. The lower pane in the near window bears a hairline crack, as if something unseen had sighed against it and left behind a fine white line. None of these is ruinous. None demands great force. They are the sorts of things that invite attention rather than alarm. The precise kind of small failing that is honored here because mending it is also a way of returning a place to its own quiet dignity. They gather round the trouble with the same calm as one might gather round a bird that has come to sit on a windowsill. Sina lifts the curtain and runs her fingers along the damp seam, testing the weave. It yields in a way that reveals a softness in the linen, the thread pulled thin by a dozen rains. Bjarne holds the pane up to the lamp. The crack runs like a sleep line across the glass, and the lamplight catches it and fractures into a thin, patient spider web. Eldri places her palm upon the wood and listens. The wood, even when wet to the touch, has a will to endure that she recognizes. It will take a steady hand. They begin to list what is needed, not as a rush, but as a sort of inventory of care. Waxed thread. Beeswax warmed and worked into the fiber. A strip of oak for resailing the frame. Tin grommets and a mallet. Parchment or thin horn to make new translucent panes. Linen tape for edging. A sand glass to keep soft time. Signe mentions a particular spool of thread that has held up better than most. Bjarne speaks of a small block of oak that will make a neat backing for the seam. Inga offers bulbs she keeps for their tough, fibrous roots. These might, she suggests, be boiled down into a glue that is more yielding than modern adhesives. Halldor unmasks a little tin from his bag that contains fine brass washers, the sort that, when hammered, will hold leather without tearing. And then Eldri, who is the keeper of both lamp and story, poses a thought as gentle as a turning of a page. Rather than simply close the seam, she says, what if they made of the repair something that sent the hall's light outward? What if the crack in the pane became a place for a soft window, a strip of parchment or horn that would catch the lamp and scatter it like small safe stars across the street? She suggests panes made of thin, treated parchment, edged in linen and set like little shields, honored by rune-like scratches that are more ornament than incantation, so that the lamplight would not only remain inside but reach past the threshold and offer navigation to those who trudge in the rain. It is a small kind of kindness. It is a practical beauty. The idea blooms that the repair might be both functional and celebratory, to mend so that the hall may give. Hands find work with gladness when the work is also a gift. The group sets about planning. The children will cut and prepare the little panes. Sina will stitch the linen edging. Bjarne will make the oak supports and set grommets. Halldor will advise on the payment of the seams with brass. Inga will bring food to keep them steady. Eldri will watch the lamp and turn the sand glass for each careful task, so that even the hurrying of the hands retains polite, measured time. They begin by preparing the materials, and the preparation itself is a kind of worship of small things. Beeswax is warmed until it takes on the scent of comb and meadow. A palmful is warmed and worked into the waxed thread until each strand glows with a softness that will slide through linen without catching. Tove sits under a shawl of lamplight, her tongue pressed to the corner of her mouth as she folds a sheet of parchment with the concentrated attention of someone making the first letter of a story. The parchment has been treated with a thin wash of oil so that it will resist the smallest damp. When Tove lays a finger along the fold, it gives with the patient obedience of good paper. Leif learns how to mark the grommet holes with a blunt awl. His strokes are careful, then surer, then true. Bjarne shows him how to back the hole with a small disc so the leather will not tear, how to lay the oak strip under the seam so that when it is rehoisted, the curtain will hang flat and not sag with wet. Halldor steadies young hands when the mallet is raised, and lets the blow fall on the peen until brass sings, and the washer pulls taut. Signe hums as she works. The hum is not about the repair alone, but about the sort of continuity sewing supports. The same hum that once steadied a child asleep against a mother's shoulder. There are small, exquisite gestures in their motions. Eldri presses a burnished finger, just an inch, of beeswax into the end of a frayed thread, smoothing it so it will not knot. Bjarne, with a block of oak and a soft-faced hammer, taps a grommet until it is bedded, and the linen tends to the shape set out for it. Inga breaks bread and passes it round. The young folk dip their pieces into a pot of thick jam, and speak of nothing in particular, for mending is also a time for unspoken company. Asa, the storyteller, shares a short tale about how once a shepherd sewed a torn cloak into a patchwork, and how strangers later found shelter under the very patches. Nobody laughs too loudly, because their laughter would break the spell of concentration, but there is warmth in the exchange. The sand glass becomes a metronome, by which small tasks are measured. Eldri turns it often, and each time the last grains fall, they make the hall feel a little more like a breathing thing. The sound of the sand is nothing like the clatter of war drums. It is thin and honest, a gentle counting that steadies the hands. As it empties for the second and third times, the weary binding of the seam begins to take form. The children learn the small economy of work, how a stitch taken too far will pucker, how a burnished edge will keep out the damp, how a well-set grommet will bear the tug of wind and not yield. There are moments that show how mending is not merely technical, but an act of memory. Signa pauses and tells of her mother, who taught her to bind a seam while humming a tune about the sea. The tune, as she hums it now, seems to pull the lamplight tighter. For a moment the hall is anchored to a sea that none of them are near, a sea remembered as a pattern of pulsing. Asa produces from her coat pocket a scrap of blue cloth that has been darned in 12 places. She smooths it on her knee and shows how each new stitch made the cloth into something more than it had been. Proof of patience and proof of care. The hall listens, and the stitched cloth seems to be more beautiful for the marks it bears. Children make mistakes, and the hall treats those mistakes like lessons rather than faults. Tove's first pane is cut a fraction too wide and must be eased by Sina's patient fingers. The two of them whisper as if conspirators in a tiny theater of craft. Leif's hand slips and nicks a finger. Haldor pops a ribbon of linen into the boy's palm and asks him to press it while the seam is rethought. There is a casual generosity to these moments, a small chorus of help rather than a single masterful voice, which ensures that the work is never a trial but always a conversation. Outside, the rain keeps a time against the roof. Its sound is not a threat but a companion, an even hand that encourages the hall into its inward tasks. The lamp breathes. The sand glass runs. The patched pieces begin to take on an aspect beyond usefulness. The parchment panes that Tove and Sina cut and edge are not merely replacements for the cracked glass. They have been rubbed with a faint amber stain that makes them blush with color when the lamp touches them. Asa adds a border of light ink work, small rune-like marks that mean nothing the way a name on a locket means nothing to anyone except the wearer. They are marks of affection, of remembrance. When the panes are laid on the table, they look like a small field of lanterns waiting to be planted. There is also merriment light enough not to disturb the night's mood. Bjarne jokes about the time he tried to fix a drummer's drum and ended up making music with the leather. The children laugh, and the laughter falls soft into the kettle steam. Inga offers a faintly ridiculous ode to her mashed root cakes. Eldri, who has the steadier laugh, calls for one more turn of the sand glass so they will not hurry the final attachments. The table becomes a small theater of skilled hands and easy speech. As the work progresses, they find ways to celebrate the unremarkable. When a grommet sits true, they clap their palms together once, like two people who agree upon the same thought. When a stitch follows the seam with the humility of a good companion, Someone will announce it, quietly, as if reading a line that pleases. The repaired linen is folded into a neat parcel and set aside. The repaired pane is placed against the lamp, and for a moment the hall holds its breath. The lamp's light passes through the parchment and falls upon the table in a soft, colored sheet. They all look up at the effect as if seeing their work reflected back like a small, clear answer. Eldri stands and moves to the frame where the curtain has been loosened. She takes the oak strip in both hands and listens with her thumb to the wood, as if to hear where it will want to sit. Bjarne steps in with his mallet, Sina with her spool, Tove with a hand on the lower edge of the curtain, ready to guide. Haldor offers a final, practiced suggestion about the angle of the grommet so that the rain will bead and run harmlessly away. The children hold their breath with the adults. Even Asa stops her stories for the time of lifting and setting. When they hoist the curtain back into place and the patched panes are secured, the first change is theatrical in its modesty. The lamplight, which had been contained, spills outward in new ways through the small parchment shields. It falls in soft bands upon the threshold, across the wet cobbles, and across the wooden bench outside where a stray cat has come to watch and has settled into a round, unimpressed loaf of fur. The colors are not garish. They are near the hue of late apple and spent oat, and they fall like small hands laid upon the road. A stranger who walks by may only see a gentle band of light that guides his step. Those who live near enough will notice the new pattern on the floor and will think of hands and tea and long, ordinary love. Yet there remains a small part of the job unfinished. The lower pane has been reinforced and the curtain rehung, but the oak strip must be nailed in more securely, and the final edging sewn along the inside where the curtain rubs against the sill. They have finished enough for the rain to be kept at bay, but not everything is tenfold certain. The final tightening requires that the hall wait for the sand glass to measure the last shifts of time, and yet the hour is wearing late, and who knows what sort of temper the night may have. Eldri wipes her palms and looks at each face around the table. The sense of perhaps is gentle here. They are content with what has been done and thoughtful about what is still to come. The kettle has cooled to a warm sigh. The bread is down to its last crumbs. Inga pours a thin cup of sweetened herb brew and passes it to Eldri, who drinks and lets the warmth travel slow lie to her fingertips. She reaches for the sand glass and turns it, not in haste, but to set a steady beat for what will come next. The first grains fall and make a little hush. It is a sound that matches the hall's breathing. Outside, the rain patters with a softer footstep, as if noticing the new light and pausing. Eldri climbs the narrow stairs to the attic at last, carrying the quilt that was to be used to stuff the lower hem while the final work is done. The attic is small and kept spare. It smells of dry linen, cedar, and the last year's wool. She lays the quilt across a small stool and runs her fingers along its patched surface, each square a note from some past winter. There is a method to how she folds and prepares things for sleep, a ritual of clearing that is itself a kind of mending. She turns the sand glass again and watches the grains fall while she arranges the quilt, and as she does so, she remembers the quiet evenings when she was apprenticed here, the way the hall would glimmer on nights like this, and how the ritual of repair would draw out a communal breath. Down below, the hall continues to hum with small activity. The children practice their stitches upon a scrap, learning to follow the line their elders set. Bjarne measures once more the oak till it fits without stress. Signe dips her thread, and sings under her breath a different verse of the lullaby she began earlier. The tune has become the familiar contour of the night's labor. Inga stacks the emptied plates and wipes the rim of the kettle with care. Asa, who has listened for the edges of the room as if for the frayed ends of a story, draws a small sketch on the edge of a scrap piece of parchment. A single shield that looks more like a window. Eldri descends with the quilt and places it near the table where someone will keep it ready for the last work. She pauses at the threshold. The lamplight through the new panes makes soft bands upon the floor. There is a hush that is not the absence of sound, but the presence of a settled attentiveness. They all move with hands that know what is necessary. The work awaits the final motions, the oak strip to be seated and clenched, the last stitches to be sewn so the edge will not fray, the grommet that must be set to withstand another rain. Before they begin the final tightening, Eldri turns once more the sand glass and, in its slow falling, finds a measure that suits the night. The grains spill and make the hall feel like a breath held and then let out. It is a neat place to stand on the edge of doing and finished. The repair has been mostly done. The light has already changed the room, but the full ceremony of completion has not yet been said. They are content to wait for that last hour to be claimed by steady hands and careful tools. The moment is a pause that tastes of possibility. It holds the small suspense of ordinary life, the certainty that mending can be resumed tomorrow if need be, and the gentler certainty that what they have done already has made the passage of the rain kinder for those who walk under it. Outside, boots pass and the wet street breathes. Inside, a child hums. The lamp keeps vigil. The sand glass empties and is turned once again, its sound a slim invitation. They gather their tools and their attention for the last movements, and the hall, which has been listening all evening, leans in to receive the small, finishing labor. They gather their tools and their attention for the last movements, the small, steady choreography that will close the evening's work and set the hall to rest. Bjarne takes the oak strip and sets it beneath the curtain's hem, feeling for the place where damp had tried to pull the fabric away from the frame. His palms know the grain. He presses the wood into the fold and listens for the minute shift that means it has seated itself. Sina brings her needle threaded with the waxed cotton, the thread glancing like a thin rope of light when she draws it through the lamplight. Haldor lifts the mallet with an economy of motion and lays the brass washer into place as Leif steadies the hole with fingers that have grown surer over the evening. Eldri stands by the threshold, her hand on the lamp's handle to keep it steady, and watches the motion of the group as if she were watching a seam being stitched together by the turning of a single thought. There is no hurry. The sand glass runs and runs again. Hands move in a language older than speech. Fold, press, pierce, set. The mallet's blows are soft and measured, each one encouraging the metal to take its place without shock. The thicker leather strip is eased into the seam, folded so the lower hem will not drag and bite at the sill. Sina's needle moves in and out like a small word spoken between friends, bringing cloth to cloth with even breaths. At one point, Leif's wrist falters, and the oak slips against his palm. He swallows, surprised at his own small clumsiness, but Bjarne's hand is already there, steadying, guiding his fingers back to the right pressure. Gentle, Bjarne murmurs, and the single word smooths the boy's tension like oil across a hinge. Eldri smiles without interrupting, and lifts the lamp just enough to make the seam's shadow fall clear where they must work. The lamp seems to answer her with a whisper of brighter wick, opening a little more of its yellow eye onto the table. Tove, with the last of her parchment squares, finishes trimming a little edge and runs her thumb along the linen tape before tucking it into the prepared slot. She breathes into the task as if the breath itself were a needle. Long, slow, necessary. Asa, who has been cleaning crumbs from the table rim with a neat thumb, tells a short, tongue-in-cheek account of the time she once used a patched bag to hide a loaf from a hungry goose. The story is small and perfectly timed, and the hall chuckles like a collection of spoons. It is an evening's marginalia, exactly the sort of small charm that keeps the night's work companionable. When the final washer is hammered and the last stitch tied, there is an unspoken moment in which no one moves. The curtain swings free when their hands release it and settles into its new line as if it had simply remembered itself. The repaired pane, set back into its frame and trimmed with linen, holds the lamplight in a new way, softening it further and breaking it into subtle colors. It is not an ostentatious thing. It is a modest miracle of craft, and they all regard it with the mild, steady pride that comes from shared labor. They do not make proclamations. Instead, they do what the hall values most. They tend. Inga fetches a fresh cloth and sweeps crumbs into a palm. Signa rolls up the remaining thread and slips the needle into a pincushion that has been thinned by use into a shape like a small plinth. Bjarne closes his toolbox with a practiced push and rubs sawdust from the creases of his hands. Haldor repacks his bag with the little tins and sticks that have a way of finding their place again. Asa folds the scrap of blue cloth and lays it beside the repaired curtain like a quiet bookmark. The lamp throws its pool of light now more generously across the wooden floor. The patched panes scatter that light in soft bands that ripple out past the threshold, across the bench, and into the rain-slick street where puddles catch the color and keep it for a moment like coin in a shallow cup. A cat on the bench blinks and rearranges itself. A passerby, wrapped against the rain, glances up, and for a second the face is warmed by the hall's modest glow. Then they pass on, guided by that slip of light as one might be guided by a remembered tune. They sit, then, and share the simplest of things. A bowl of warm porridge sweetened with a spoonful of jam. Slices of bread that have been warmed once more near the lamp. A cup of a mild, herb-scented drink that Inga insists will steady any trembling thought. The ritual of eating is slow and unremarked. Spoons are set down gently and passed with the same care as the needle and mallet. They raise their cups in a small, unceremonious toast to the work and the shelter it provides. "To hands," says Bjarne quietly, and they drink. "To the hall," says Eldri after him, and the hall answers by being itself, warm, attentive, full of tools that have been used and found faithful. Asa sets down a scrap of parchment and tells one more brief story. A memory of a woman who sewed a child's jacket into the lining of her own cloak so that the child might carry both warmth and the shape of a mother's courage. It is not a story of grand courage, nor a call to any great deed. It is a domestic hymn, a small recognition of the ways care is passed from one to another. When she finishes, there is a hush for a breath or two, and then the room fills again with the sibilant motion of cloth and the occasional pleased noise of someone testing a stitch. Night itself seems to agree with the softened mood. The rain drops into a steady, softer pattern, and the wind keeps to its gentle negotiating with the eaves. The hall seems to lean into the quiet, as if preferring the conversation of tools and elders to the clamor of the world outside. The sand glass is turned once more by Eldri, and she holds it up for a moment as though to read the steady rain of sand, as if it were a page of something intimate. "One more turning," she says, and the phrase is both practical and ceremonial. A sentence that allows the hall to close gradually. It is then that they do something they have not done all evening. They make a small offering to the street. Using 2 of the finer panes that have been trimmed for the curtain, they suspend them on a short cord from the outer lintel so that when the wind moves the little shields, they will catch the lamplight and shake it outwards in a way that is not showy but kind. The panes are too small to be a lantern, but they are enough to greet a passer-by and signal. There is a place where hands are at work, a place where light will be found. The panes hang, and, as a breeze passes, they sway, and send a scatter of warm color over the stoop. The children are given the honor of the first lighting of those little pendants. Tove holds one end of the cord, while Leif steadies the other, and Eldri lifts the lamp so the boys can see how the light plays it through the thin parchment. For a fleeting second, Tove forgets her caution and laughs. The sound is bright and round and seems to chase away the last of the evening's tension like a hand removing a lid. Their laughter is small and full of relief. The elders smile because they remember laughing like that, and because a night spent in craft has been a night well kept. Eldri says a few quiet words. Not a prayer, but an enactment of thanks in the manner of someone who knows the shape of gratitude. To heat for warmth, to hands for steadiness, to the lamp for its patient vigil. The words are not to the air alone, they are to one another. They make a small circle with their palms cupped and lay them onto the table. There is no sermon. The sentence is a sharing. They fold their hands and let the meal finish itself like an afterthought. When the last spoon is set aside and the kettle has cooled to a pleasant warmth, they begin to collect their things. The hall is tidied with the same attentive motions as the repair. Bjarne sweeps the workbench with a small brush. Sina tucks thread and needle into their tidy places. Haldor double-checks the hammered grommets as if by feeling he might sense any reluctant one. Tove and Leif are given the small reward of a slice of the very last of the bread, and are told, half in jest, to keep out of trouble on their way home. Asa wraps her tin of sugared cakes in a scrap of cloth and tucks them into her pocket as if they were treasures. She promises to leave a slice on the windowsill in the morning for whoever needs it. Eldri, who has been keeping the lamp at a steady brightness that is neither too fierce nor too dim, turns it slightly lower when she judges the room ready. The light softens, and the band of color on the floor recedes into a gentle wash. The hall inhales. Each person, one by one, says a small farewell. Hands meet with the brief confidence of people who have shared work rather than mere time. There is an economy to the goodbyes that keeps them short and warm. The door closes with a small, conscientious thunk, and the hall is left to the few who remain and the tools that have been used. For those who stay, there is the quiet business of the final ritual. Eldri turns the sand glass once and sets a set of tiny tasks. The final edge to be oversewn, the oak strip to be fastened with 2 small nails, the panes to be given a last polishing with a cloth. She moves among them, offering a suggestion at just the right moment, or an approving nod that steadies a hand. The hall is in that liminal space between labor and rest. It waits as if holding its breath so that the last motions can be made with care. She calls up the narrow stairs to the attic to fetch the quilt again, this time with the intent that it will be laid across the table before the lamp and sand glass, so that anyone who wishes might rest their hands upon its warm squares for a heartbeat or two. The quilt is heavy with memories. Each patch is a winter stitched into a square. When Eldri sets it down, The smell of dry wool and cedar rises for a moment and settles into the room like a soft benediction. They lay the quilt across a bench near the lamp and invite the children to place their palms upon it. Tove and Leif do so with solemnity, the kind children show when given a task that feels important. Eldri places her own hands on the quilt as well, and, in a voice that is low and easy as a murmur, she speaks of the hall as if it were a living thing. Not a place, she says, but a kind of keeping, of hands, of light, of stories. The words have no grandeur. They are simply a map pointing out what the night has already shown them. It is enough. Slowly, with the final stitches made and the oak fastened, they fold the repaired curtain and tuck the spare panes into a box labeled simply for rainy nights. Haldor shoulders his bag and gives a small, almost imperceptible bow to the room. Bjarne slings his box and tips his cap. Sina smooths her apron, and Inga gathers the last of the plates. The children are given little lanterns of paper to make their way home by, and Eldri watches them thread into the night like a pair of small, careful stars. The hall is left with 2 or 3 people. Eldri, Asa, and the cat curled in a sunless knot. The rest have vanished into the evening. Guided by the light the hall now sends out, Eldri turns the sand glass for the last time on this work night, watching the grains count down a small private arithmetic of rest. She folds the quilt and sets it upon a stool. Her hands move with the economy of habit. She wipes a smear of paste from the corner of the table and tucks the needle back into its home. The lamp is coaxed lower until only a personal pool remains. The hall smells of beeswax, warmed loaf, and the faint tang of river metal from Bjarne's hammer. Eldri takes a small breath and allows herself a moment to be held by the very quiet she tends. She begins the small evening ritual she reserves for nights when the work has been of the heart as well as the hand. She moves to a low shelf and takes down a narrow, shallow bowl of hot herb brew. More to scent the night than to be drunk, for she does not yet wish sleep's full weight. She sets the bowl near the lamp and drops in 2 sprigs of rosemary. Then, by habit, runs her thumb over the seams of the quilt as if testing a child's pulse. Eldri gently smooths the last fold, lays the sandglass beside the lamp, and takes 3 small turns of the grains, each turn accompanied by a considered, soft breath. As the 3rd turn begins, the narration shifts its attention. The hall's immediate business is concluded, and now the house of story opens its doors to a different work, the work of resting. The voice turns, as a teller will, and invites the listener to lean in. You are asked, not commanded, but invited to let the hall's quiet go with you as you prepare to sleep. The invitation is modest, to follow a familiar rhythm, to breathe as one who has seen the making of a thing and is allowed to let it rest. If you are lying down, notice the weight of the mattress beneath you, the way it takes you as you are. If you are seated, find the easing of your shoulders. Allow them to fold forward, as if in a small bow to the day. Let your hands find a comfortable place. Hear, if you will, the distant rain still tapping its slow notes against the roof, a metronome of the north that will keep you steady. Picture, softly, the lamp that Eldri tended, its wick breathing in and out, not unlike your chest. Feel the hall's lamplight as a band across the heart. Nothing fierce, but warming, patient. Take a slow breath in through the nose for a count that feels natural to you. 3, perhaps 4. And then let it out through the mouth as if loosening the knot of a cord. Again, breathe in and imagine the lamp's light filling your lungs like pale honey. Breathe out and imagine the breath carrying the day's rough edges away into the rain. With each inhalation, the sand in the glass seems to tremble. With each exhale, a few grains fall as if to measure your release. Now, with your next breath, allow your attention to travel down the body in the way of a slow inspection. Bring your focus to the top of the head and notice any small tension there. Do not strain to remove it. Only name it as you might name an object you will put away. Forehead tightness, jaw held. As you breathe out, let that tension dissolve like thread untied from a seam. Let your scalp soften. Let your eyelids grow heavier in their sockets as if the parchment panes the children made were being lowered across a small window. Move your attention to your shoulders. These often carry the day's small burdens as a cloak wears a pocket of coins. Breathe into the shoulders and imagine the lamp's gentle warmth melting the coins into soft wax. On the exhalation, feel the shoulders drop 2 centimeters closer to the spine. Let the breath be a careful seamstress, taking up slack where there was tautness. Turn now to the arms. Let them rest. Feel the weight of the hands. Let your fingers relax as if setting down a small tool after a long night's careful work. Notice each knuckle loosen. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out and let your hands be still. Bring attention to the chest and the heartbeat beneath it. Imagine the lamp there, a small living flame, its breath in rhythm with yours. With every inhale, it widens. With every exhale, it returns to its restful center. Picture this lamp's light moving through you like a warm tide, washing over memory's small scars and smoothing them into the familiar contours of your life. As you move lower in this quiet sweep, sense the belly and the soft, steady motion of digestion, of life continuing in small acts you may not always notice. Breathe into the belly and let it expand like a small bellows. Breathe out and feel a sense of release, as if unhooking a cloth peg and letting a sheet fall free. Let the focus move to the hips and the base of the spine. Imagine the oak strip Bjarne pressed into the hem, solid, supportive. Picture that same steadiness beneath you, holding you with patient grain. Breathe in and imagine the weight settling into that oak. Breathe out and let a sense of safety spread. Now down into the thighs and knees. Each joint unwinds like a carefully oiled hinge. Let the memory of careful hammering with measured blows be a rhythm to lull the muscles into rest. Breathe, and with each out-breath, feel the muscles surrender their small contractions. Release into the calves, the ankles, the feet. Picture the small pendants swinging outside the door, catching the lamp and sending color into the wet night. Let that gentle motion calm the tendons and ligaments in your feet. Imagine the puddles on the street reflecting the warm bands of light, flowing, not still, and let the image help your feet go heavy and rooted. Stay with the breath. If thoughts come, about tasks unfinished or plans you have, imagine them as scraps of fabric set on a table. Acknowledge each scrap, then fold it gently and set it aside to be dealt with at an appointed time. The hall has its own care and will keep things for you. For now, you may let them rest. If you find your mind wandering to details, you might imagine the sound of the sand glass. Hear the faint, honest whisper of grain on glass. With each whisper, your breathing slows. Count the sand's soft falling with the rhythm of your breaths, a small counting that asks nothing of you but stillness. Count to 4 as you breathe in. Let 4 be your liberating number as you breathe out. Or choose a number that sits with you and follow it. The important thing is the gentleness of the count, not its strictness. Your breathing is now a tide, and you are the harbor. The lamp is the lodestar, small and steady. The parchment panes are down, soft eyelids drawn over a small window, and you might imagine the light seeping through them in slow ribbons, warm as a parent's hand. Each ribbon is a reassurance that the world holds you. Let that thought be enough. Now imagine a particular small object from the hall. Perhaps the cloth Asa patched a dozen times, perhaps a little brass washer resting in Bjarne's palm, perhaps the quilt's patched square warmed by Eldri's fingers. Picture that object clearly for a single breath, and then allow it to dissolve into the lamplight, its edges softening until only the sense of care remains. Breathe in that care. Breathe out with gratitude, not as obligation, but as recognition. Feel the weight of your body in the bedding once more. Let the mattress receive you as the hall received its tools, without judgment, simply taking what is offered. Allow the breath to become softer still, like a flame that no longer needs to blaze to be present. If sleep comes, accept it without tugging. If sleep hesitates, be patient as the sand glass counting its grains. If you would like, imagine the hall from outside for just a moment. The little shields and panes glowing like watchful eyes, the patched curtain moving a degree in the night wind, the little band of light across the cobbles like a promise made without rhetoric. Suppose morning will come with a different light, a clear, pale wash that will be new but familiar. For now, let tonight's gentle work be enough. As the breath becomes shallower and the body surrenders, you may feel thoughts ebb and leave in a slow, dignified procession. Let them go. You have been permitted to set down the day's stitches and to trust that some hands will pick them up again when needed. The lamp's flame is watching on your behalf. The hall keeps its vigil. When the breath has dwindled to a near whisper and the body has settled like a book being closed, accept the quiet as friends accept one another's presence, not announced, but evident. There is no need to seek assurance beyond this room. Let the image of the patched pane and the lamp wrap you in a small, luminous fold. Allow the lamp's glow to become the last thing you know before sleep draws a curtain over thought. Rest now. The hall is silent, but for a soft, steady sound. The rain, the lamp's slow breath, the sand glass counting out the evening. You are kept, and you are free to sleep. If you awake in the night, remember the band of light that led a passer-by home and think of it as an old compass. Simple, reliable. Remember the quilt's patches, the children's small hands, the mallet's patient song. These things are the true currency of the hall's watchfulness. In the morning, new hands will come and the hall's business will continue. Repairs, stories, the sharing of bread. But that is morning's concern. For now, let the restful hush hold you. Let the lamp go on, keeping its steady small flame for those who prefer its watchfulness. Good night, then, from Valhalla's silent hall, where lamplight meets rain and hands have made the world a little more gentle. If you would like more nights like this, a gentle subscription keeps the lamp lit.